All right, I'll try to raise my voice so you guys, everybody can hear me. So good afternoon, everybody. Dave Rimkus. I'm Director of Supply Chain Decarbonization for SE Advisory Services. Really just want to spend some time with you talking a little bit about our programs around Scope 3, around emissions reductions we have within our suppliers and our customers. I kind of want to start with just two figures for you. One being give or take 90%, right? So we talk about 90%. I think every large multinational company, probably in this country and the world, has up to 90 to 95% of their emissions outside their four walls, right? So that is your logistics, purchase, service, and goods buckets as it's coming into your facility. And then as you add value and leave your facility, end of life, customer use, transportation as well, that all makes up outside your four walls what we call the Scope 3, right? And about 90% of emissions. Another number I like to throw out to you is around 23,500. And that is really the number of companies or small and medium-sized businesses that really account for 90% of those emissions just in the US alone, right? So when we talk about that, a lot of our programs work with different small and medium-sized businesses that may be, I would say, very interested in cost reductions, or that they may not have the resources they need to drive decarbonization around Scope 1 and Scope 2. So that's a little bit what we try to do within some of our programs here. Before I kind of introduce our fireside chat here, I'll go through just a couple slides and kind of what some of our programs of how do we really help large multinationals understand their supply chain hotspots, their emissions, and then how to improve those. So if you kind of see this chart here, thinking on the left, working from the left to right, the green is really where within SE Advisory Services, we work with large multinational companies and say, hey, how many suppliers do you have in this region? What are your hotspots? Where are your largest emission footprints? Is it steel? Is it copper? Is it stampings? We start taking a look at that, design a program, and then we really start engaging with their suppliers and their upstream supply chain. And that's kind of that middle box around engagement, okay? And you can kind of see the colors. As we move more towards the blue, we start really engaging the small and medium-sized businesses that really service these large multinationals. And we educate them, we engage them, and then we start tracking every movement that they have within our platform, Zygo Hub. You may have seen it in the Innovation Hub with our friend Vishnu. And we really start to learn about them, onboard them, talk to them one-on-one, and understand really where they're at from a maturity perspective, be able to take their own efficiency opportunities. I think something that's key here is a lot of companies in the world today are looking at, I'll set my baseline, I'll set a roadmap, and then good luck suppliers or customers, and you got to go hit it, right? So within a lot of the programs that we have today, that blue circle on the end, it's really where we, I would say, influence and convince small, medium-sized businesses and give them the roadmap, the end in mind, the return on investment, whether it be efficiency or electrification projects, or maybe renewable energy. We've had a lot of success around renewable energy to take the proper action. And then on the bottom here, we have communications, marketing services, program management, and supplier engagement software, right? Where we help scale the amount of small and medium-sized businesses we work with. So as we get into this, there are a couple of these programs, and this is a busy slide. I'll hit the high level here for you really quickly. But we really have two different types of programs that we run. We partner with likes of Pepsi or Target or P&G, and they're like, Dave, we need help on our supply chain, our Scope 3. So we really take a look at where those suppliers are located within that first phase, working with the large multinational. But then across the top, and that's kind of a point of this session a little bit, is we had companies come to us and be like, we are beating up our suppliers, right? We're beating them up, we're survey fatigue, we're asking them different questions. The Energize program is one that we started in 2020. It started with 3 pharmaceutical companies that came to us and said, let's start a supply chain program and we're going to band together and break down the competitive walls. We're all using the same suppliers, right? So let's get our messaging right. Let's get the white papers right. Let's get set goals in place. Those 3 companies that grew to 10, right? 7 more joined once they understood the mission of this is to help the suppliers reach their decarbonization goals and reduce their carbon emissions footprint. Today, Energize is 25 different companies. Right, so we're working day in and day out in a consortium approach within a pharmaceutical industry to really set standards, drive impact with all of their like suppliers. I think we're working with about their top 800 suppliers today, right? And you can see there in the lower right-hand corner, power purchase agreements. We've really been able to cohort some of the load in these programs and put it together and connect it with the developer and break ground on new solar and wind assets for this. And what this is we do a lot of these programs for the small and medium-sized companies that don't have the power and don't have the leverage to do a lot of the things that the large multinationals do. And that's just one piece to be able to do it. Okay, so you can see about 1.3 terawatts, and we have 8 more cohorts of what we call in process right now to help do that. Another program that we have down here is Catalyze. Same thing, Earth and Energize, and it's semiconductors. We're focused mainly on opening up the APAC markets from a renewable energy perspective, still very early on in that process. And then Materialize, getting really close, what we say cradle to grave, we're getting in the metals and mining area, right? So as we start to try to help and understand how to even be able to do that around electrification first, that'll extrapolate through the rest of the supply chain because many of those clients will use those suppliers. So as we go through, I think one of the other things I didn't even talk about in that first slide is our own zero carbon program. So there was a supplier day yesterday, and Anna, who will be joining us here shortly, was in that as well. And what this has done around 2020, 2021, we decided to focus on our top 1,000 suppliers within Schneider. How do we decarbonize, right? We set up a goal. It said, we need those top 1,000 suppliers to reduce their emissions in their own operations by 50%, or 50% of those suppliers. As of last week, I think we hit 53%. Now, a lot of this is going to be self-reported through those companies to report up, but they have taken the action, the education, the engagement. A lot of it has been free to them as far as collaboration that Schneider has sponsored, but it's really about giving the proper tool set to the SMBs that may not have the resources or cost constraints or maturity to help get there. Some are more mature than Schneider, right? Or more mature than our large multinationals, and they're well on their way, right? So I think it's really great to see this. It's 50 countries, 65 different procurement categories. We also take time to train the procurement teams. Hey, what does this look like in your set of mind? What's the end in mind? The procurement teams have the conversations on the front line with the suppliers and hold that commercial relationship, right? So a lot of this is upstream, but I think as we get into this, we're also going to talk about downstream and upstream with the panel and fireside chat that we're going to have potentially here. So on that, I will introduce Tony Brown, who is VP of Assets Management at McDermott, to come join us, and Anna Bertoli, CEO of Miguel. And one more thing is, we take a look at supply chain and kind of moving upwards, I would say, in that purchase, service, and goods bucket. But Tony is a customer, a client of Schneider, right? So we're going to be able to understand downstream what he's able to do as well. And Anna, one of our key suppliers, I kind of want to congratulate Anna because yesterday she just received on the supplier day, the Supplier of the Year for the Sustainability Award for taking the most action. It was recognized. Thank you for joining us, and please give him a warm hand as we start. Okay.
Thanks, Dave.
Yep. So you guys want to introduce yourself and kind of walk through a little bit about what you do at McDermott and Miguel?
Yeah, so at McDermott, McDermott's a global energy EPC and engineering construction company. So, global energy projects around the world. One of the unique features of our company is we're vertically integrated. So not only do we have engineers and project teams sitting in offices, but we also own fabrication yards and construction vessels that we use to execute the project. So, we're a real build-it company. And so that actually informs our approach to decarbonization. And, we'll talk about it here. My role at McDermott is, as the asset owning part of the business. So, really managing the fabrication yards and the construction vessels, which pose a particular problem when it comes to decarbonization.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tony. Appreciate it. Anna?
And at Miguel, we are a producer of components in non-ferrous metals, so mainly copper, brass, and aluminum. And our main operation are casting, forging, and mechanical machining. So we are upstream, and we are the ones with a lot of CO2 emissions. Like, we are in the oil economy, so we are the part of the business who supplies the physical parts. Mainly our products for Schneider, they go into circuit breakers, I think, and then we supply different sectors, the OEMs in electricity, let's say, and then many of them in the water business applications.
Okay, perfect. Thank you both for sharing and kind of kicking us off. I kind of want to break this down into 3 different pillars here. So one, we'll talk a little bit about strategy and implementation, and ask Tony and Anna here to kind of give us some insights and feedback here. The second, we'll hit kind of a pillar around collaboration and engagement. When working with a lot of large multinational clients, that supplier or customer engagement piece is absolutely key. Ton of teams, a ton of companies struggle with that. So we'll have some insights on that as well. And the last piece is really, let's talk about data and technology, right? I mean, we can really work with a couple small, medium-sized businesses or small clients, but really, how do we start thinking about scalability and driving the real impact we want to see? So, Tony, I'll probably throw it to you first here, specifically on the strategy and implementation pieces. What specific goals have you set for your organization, and how are you tracking those today around emissions reductions?
So, I mentioned earlier, we're in the energy segment. And so to understand our goals, you really need to understand kind of where we are. And so when I say energy, it's oil and gas and energy transition. So, obviously our segment is probably a late mover in terms of decarbonization, but we've, jumped in with both feet. So about 5 years ago, we really started looking seriously at our carbon footprint and what we could do to move the needle in terms of decarbonization. And once we took a look at it, we set some what we thought were aggressive targets, again, particularly considering the types of assets that we have. And we looked out 10 years to 2030 and said, we want to get down by half by then, so 50% reduction in 10 years. And then looking out to 2050, looking at net zero at that point. And so as we look at ourselves, we're on track for that. We're halfway through that first decade. And, as we look at our suppliers, the next step of this is really sort of leveraging the supply chain. And, we're engaging with them now. And while we haven't set those targets yet, I expect them to be equally aggressive, in order to get us to where we need to be by 2050.
Perfect. Yeah, and you touched on something there, product carbon footprinting. I'm going to come back to that one, I think, and touch base on that. That's one of the key takeaways that we'll talk about in the end too, is transparency and resiliency and different types of data sets that can help scale that. So, and Anna, a little bit different on your end, right? It's not so much maybe scope 3 or working with your suppliers, but also maybe some of your internal goals, right? And how have those been developed, and what actions have you taken on your own, maybe scope 1 and scope 2 within your facilities?
Yeah. So let's say since we are an energy-intensive business and we are located in Italy, for us it's crucial the attention to energy consumption and related CO2 emissions. So let's say it's in our culture to use efficiently the resources, but then other than that, we formally started in 2021 when we began an ESG journey together with some external consultants. In the case it was Deloitte. And so we have started, let's say, our journey doing the assessment initially, setting some KPIs according to the GRI standards, and then defining a roadmap with a number of action. Actually, we have 95 action on the action plan, and the ones related to, let's say, more the CO2 emission and environment aspect are about 20 of those. And so based on that, we are keeping track of how we are performing in our factories and the different targets. Some of them are quantitative targets, so meaning how you are producing compared to previous year in relative terms. Some of them are action or analysis or activity that we have to perform in our factories in order to improve our results.
Yeah, that is not easy. Right, and we're going to get into that a little bit later as well, as around stakeholder engagement and influence and how you were able to kind of tell that story a little bit internally, right, to drive the action.
Yeah, let's say our people, we are a local producer, so the people they live close to our factories, right? So it's not so difficult for the internal stakeholders, so they appreciate. Of course, for them it's a plus, right? But yeah. It's not always so easy, especially the technology, right? The process, that's where the difficult part comes.
Yeah, there's a learning curve there.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. And I think, so that's really good to talk about, what's your strategy implementation? It sounds like, Tony specifically, you're a little bit earlier on that journey, right? So when we talk about the supplier engagement or maybe the collaboration that we have, I think you mentioned in the past, yeah, I think you're just on that journey about engaging suppliers. You mentioned that, right? And you made the comment to me yesterday over lunch about maybe engaging customers or clients as well. So tell me a little bit more kind of about how that journey, where you're at. I don't know if you have any lessons learned quite yet, but I think it's still pretty early.
Yeah, no. So like you said, it's early with us with respect to suppliers, but we've been going on this journey, again, over the past 5 years. And during the course of that, we've learned quite a bit, some about what decarbonization means. And those have been some real surprises early on. There were some, I'd say, quick wins, things that, we thought that this would be an expensive venture, and it actually turned out to be a cost-saving venture. A lot of the things that we did early on, payback periods were almost immediate or within a year or two. A lot of it is just taking the burning of fuel out of our value chain and replacing it with electricity, which is cheaper. A bit of CapEx cost, but immediate paybacks, very quick paybacks. Things like, we were running compressors generators for electricity, compressors for air in our yards with diesel. And so just to get get those electrified, immediately paid a return. And then so, as we looked at that, at the same time we were going on this journey with a lot of our clients. A lot of the oil and gas industry was in the same place. They were thinking about, how do they decarbonize? And so we did some studies actually, with Schneider Electric around producing, an offshore upstream facility with reduced carbon footprint. We called it net zero facility. That was a little ambitious. But we did see, and this is several years ago, so I think the opportunity is even bigger, but we saw, the opportunity for 76% reduction in carbon emissions from the operating facility and something like 17% during the construction phase, which we thought were, significant impacts. And again, surprisingly, the cost impact was 2%.
Interesting.
So it was not, I think everybody thinks that this is going to be a huge impact to the bottom line, and actually what we found is it's a positive impact. And so we've gone, been having this conversation with our suppliers, and starting that conversation, but really we've been having it with our customers for the last 5 years. And many of them are converted. They're trying to find ways to implement this into their facilities, into their programs. And so again, now we need to take that message around the wins to our supply chain and help them understand how they can leverage this. Just a couple more numbers. Over the course of the last year, again, we've been having that engagement, that initial engagement, and what we found is about 55% of them understand and have measured their greenhouse gas emissions. So there's 45% where there's still work to do. But again, it's a good starting point. And with those folks, again, it's going to be how do we get quick wins? How can we share what we've learned? Again, trying to decarbonize these fabrication facilities, some of the customer products. What can we do with them that can capture some of the same lessons?
And so that's a great journey. And when you were going through that journey and you started seeing the 2%, price and maybe some cost savings, is that when the internal stakeholders started changing their mind about some things within your company, or did you always have the executive support and leadership to do a lot of these?
So I think we had the executive support. The executives were there. They understood that this is where we needed to be, and we saw not just sort of the global attention on the issue, but we also saw the market opportunities kind of going forward. Right, is if we can carry this badge of being on the forefront of decarbonization, lower greenhouse gas emissions, that's a marketing sell for us. And then, as we engaged with the workforce, what we saw were the frankly, the young people were on board right from the bat, right? Like they were enthusiastic. In fact, we had to convince some of them that they also had to work on traditional work too.
Prioritize. Yeah.
With the more experienced workforce, to me, it's bringing them back around to that marketing point and to that value proposition, which is, hey, the work today is, in some cases maybe more traditional, more oil and gas focused, but in the future, which we need to start building now, we need this business to be sustainable, which means that we need to be, kind of reorienting towards these markets today so that we're ready in 10 years time when they're there. So it's really about explaining to people kind of the why you're doing this. This is not for show. This is, again, to build a sustainable business for the next, McDermott's been around for 100 years. We always talk about, we want to be around for another 100 years, right? In order to do that, you have to be looking forward.
You heard that with Schneider this morning on the keynote as well, right? Been around for a while.
That's right.
And I think, Anna, on your end here a little bit too, I mean, just, receiving the award, right, yesterday. Can you talk a little bit, about maybe the influence, you as a leader of the company and the CEO, I think you are definitely on board, you have that stakeholder engagement, but maybe talk a little bit about the external pressures or external convincing that has come, to you and really what triggers you to start taking some of the action at those wonderful actions you've been taking to point.
No. So let's say what drove us to action. One is internally, okay, and that's a cost factor. So in a casting plant, the energy cost can go up to 6% of revenues, okay? So in a forging plant, 4.5% of revenues. So we have a lot of, let's say, internal reasons. Then on top of that, of course, we have a lot of external factors as well. So I would say our shareholders are very sensitive to the topic. So they push us a lot on these subjects. We have also in our shareholding structure a private equity fund. So since a few years, we receive a lot of pressure on these goals as well. And then for sure, our customers. So we see that increasingly more and more customers ask us, in some cases, just to measure, let's say, our CO2 emissions, but then in many other cases to give targets and improve our results. Of course, Schneider Electric is one of those. So it's really focused on this. And so on top of what is the internal things that we do in order to reduce our own emission, last year we decided to purchase some geos to offset our Scope 2 emissions. And that's what took us to the top of the list with Schneider. That is one of the things that took us to the top of the list. And that's, I think, is one of the reasons why we won the award. So it's a mix of our culture, our DNA in the process that we manage, together with the, let's say, overall view that's the only way for our business and to operate properly in that kind of sector, to make it attractive also for people. So that's also a very important factor to make it, interesting also for our employees and for young generations. So it's really important for us as well.
It's funny, you both hit on that point, right? As far as, the future workforce that we talked about this morning a little bit, and then how that thought and mentality is changing. And we see it at Schneider as well.
Yeah.
People definitely want to change the world, right? And it's refreshing. And when we talk with a lot of these small, medium-sized businesses, cost is the first thing, right? And stakeholder engagement, internal is cost is sometimes the first thing. But I was at a client last week, and we began to start overlapping their facilities to the U.S. electrical grid, right? And the price increases that we were talking about all this morning, we were literally starting to look at state by state. Hey, New Jersey is forecasted at 15% increase. This state is forecasted here. We begin to start having discussions about how do we really start not really potentially saving money around decarbonizing and going renewable, but how do we lock in the energy prices today? Long-term Rextra, power purchase agreement. How do we lock those in for the next 10 years to be able to mitigate these price increases coming to us through our procurement teams and through our suppliers and ultimately through our end consumer, right? So it's not only the money you save now, but it's also understanding where the electrical grid, where the market is going, what the price is looking at. We all know AI is not going to stop with the data centers or the AI factories, is what we call them. And those prices continue to go up. So even in the US right now, there's a lot of opportunity for these companies to be able to take action to lock those in at a lower price. So something interesting. Let's move a little bit to the data and technology piece, right? We definitely, it's a backbone of a lot of what we do. It's a lot of it is self-guided. Our Zygo Hub software helps suppliers along that journey. And we're beginning to bake in, I think the session before us was talking between Jen and agentic AI, beginning to bake in agentic AI within the next year to really curate supplier journeys, right? Around marginal abatement curves or ROI. But Tony, I'll throw it over to you first. Let's talk a little bit about what you're using on your Scope 3 journey potentially from a data and tech perspective.
Yeah, so we've got a third-party software that we use, so an external product, and it recently, I think, changed hands from a software ownership perspective. But, it's been important to us. It's called Fig Bytes. Again, I think recently acquired by somebody else. But, to me, the key, and it works great, and I'm sure there are a lot of great tools. To us, the key is making sure that when you're getting set up, that you're putting, reliable and good data into the system, and then you're staying consistent with how you track. With any of these things, right? Garbage in, garbage out. You've got to make sure that you're creating a consistent and solid baseline, because then you're measuring yourself based on this, right? And if you start off poorly, then you'll end up. It's a lot harder to fix when you go back.
Totally agree.
And we've done that, unfortunately, with many systems. Fortunately, we spent the time on this to set it up properly. So, and once you have it up and running, what's great is you can really start to see, as you make progress, where the key areas, where one is where you can make progress and where you need to go to next. So really informing the journey, right? Data-driven decision-making, starts there. And so it's really just getting yourself set up on something, with a strong foundation. As we roll this to our Scope 3 and start thinking about our suppliers, it's going to be, even more important, because, it won't be just us then entering data. It'll be now us collecting data from a large number of companies. And, again, back to that, 55% who've measured. So there's still 45% who, we've got to figure out how they measure and get them there, and then how we bring all of them into the fold with this system. And then thinking about, suppliers such as yours who are probably getting these requests from, many different companies, and hopefully not all in 20 different formats.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
More than 20 formats, that's for sure. But
Well, yeah, let's pull on that thread a little bit, because as Schneider, we'll be filling this information out for you as well. There's no doubt about that. But Anna, on your end too, I mean, from a tech or data perspective, is there anything that you use internally to kind of help facilitate or clean or communicate or drive action around technology?
Yes, we actually also use a third-party software.
Okay.
On that, basically we collect the information on the different plans, and that helps us a lot. It's called Cribis. It helps us a lot to collect the information and also to prepare the report. So it makes it easier to do also the summaries and keeping track of the results. So in our case, it's not so much the estimation. So the quality of the data, I think, is quite good, because mainly it's direct. Okay, by regulatory standards, the direct CO2 emission we have to measure. Okay. And Scope 1, I'm talking, the main one, I mean, you have different sources, but the main one we have to measure. And then for Scope 2, it's very simple in our case, because most of it, there are some areas where it's an estimation, but it's nothing compared to where we directly consume energy, right?
Yeah.
So in our case, I would say the data are very good. Difficult part is acting on the data, of course. So that's where the whole job stays.
Yeah. It's you hit a key point there. Is the difficult job is acting on the data, right? So we can build foundations and baselines and roadmaps, but it's really understanding what the cost impact, what the resources are going to be, what's necessary to help kind of drive that impact and doing the real work. And that's really where we start to improve, right?
And in our case, the answer is investments. So that's the case, both in machinery and technology, because a lot of upgrades in the machinery, of course, newer machines are always more efficient, but impact is dramatic in some cases. So let's say we recently this year changed some forging equipment. Let's say the new one compared to the old one reduces by 20 to 25% the energy consumption of the direct machines. So, of course, big investments, but yes. And also in other cases, we did investments in solar panel and renewable energy, which in our case is very useful because we directly consume what we produce. And so it's, let's say, easy from that point of view. And then most of our forging plants, they work during the hours. They do not do shifts. Okay, we do in mechanical machining, but not in forging. So basically, the time where we are operating are exactly the time where the sun is up. So we can basically auto-consume close to 90% of what we are producing with solar panels. So, and again, investments. So let's say we invest more or less 8% of our revenues every year. Okay, and in the last at least 5 to 6 years. Okay, and then mainly, as I said, is innovation and technology and the machines or whatever goes around it.
Yeah, the point on investment is a good one. Because we struggle with it sometimes because you've got the more efficient machine to come in. It also has the advantage of already having sensors and data collection, et cetera. But on the other hand, in a competitive environment, some of the machines we're operating are 30 plus years old. So they're long paid off. And so, when's the right time to make that trade-off of, okay, I've got a cost advantage here, but I'm not getting the efficiency and from an operational standpoint that I would get with a new machine. So you're constantly trying to weigh that up and think about that. We operate, in addition to like heavy cranes and other industrial equipment, the ships themselves, which have a 30-year life cycle, coming in and trying to slap sensors all over the place is, a bit of a challenge on some of these.
You hit something there too, like life cycle, right? So when we look at this efficiency projects and investments and machinery capabilities, it's really understanding some of the paybacks are 5 years, 10 years, even longer, right? So it's almost changing your perspective a little bit and going in and saying, hey, this asset is close to end of life. We've got to make a change one way or the other within the next 3 years, right? Now, do we want to be more efficient and go down the sustainability path, or do we just want to replace it? Right, so it's almost asking questions differently. It's not always about immediate payback, but you got to spend the money in some aspect, depending on the end of life, and to be able to do that. And we just did some audits in Eastern Europe as well for 1,500 suppliers and came back with a laundry list of things. So there's also an opportunity to start aggregating some of those projects together with lower payback and longer payback to be able to make the business case make more sense as well, right? Absolutely. So I know we don't have much time left, but maybe just one or two before I kind of turn it over to the audience. We talked a little bit about the benefits and the price. Do you see brand value in a lot of the things you're doing for maybe not for Schneider or for other clients, but is that something that you can stand behind even though it's very difficult to quantify?
Okay, let's say I'm not the best person probably to talk about brand because we do not have our own products. So our products, we are a process producer basically. But what I would say is that for us, the impact is a lot on employer branding.
Okay.
That, yes, works a lot. So we see it more and more, and we do a lot of activity in this area. And for sure, also, let's say, sharing what we are doing on sustainability and on CO2 emission helps a lot in this direction. So this is where we see the most impact.
Love it.
Yeah, I think that's we see that as well as, the external brand elements, right? Because again, as for McDermott, not only are we thinking about our customers, we're thinking about investors, we're thinking about our lenders and what they're thinking. And then, there's a whole different side of this, which is, again, to your employees and, all your other stakeholders who, want to see that, we're forward focused and future focused, and not, sort of just, thinking about the past, right? And so, again, I think that helps on all of those aspects. Again, some of those may be harder to measure, but we think it adds value, for all stakeholders.
And I can talk a little bit kind of about that value here as well from a key takeaways perspective. Want to leave a few minutes for questions, but I mean, just a couple things. You can see here, it's a holistic collaborative approach, right? And you can see on the stage here, between the three of us, it's the value chain piece, right? All up and down within multiple tiers. We really take a look at, there's more transparency happening around, like I mentioned earlier, product carbon footprinting. A lot of companies are very interested in, like, what am I buying, right? What are the hotspots in it? What is, the second tier supply, right? And we were in the supplier day yesterday with Murad, our chief supply chain officer. He's like, how about the nth tier? Right. So as we begin we're thinking very hard about product carbon footprinting, understanding what that looks back throughout multiple tiers in the supply chain. When I was in procurement 10 years ago, it was hard to look back to a second tier, right? And we couldn't get that information because it was a negotiation tactic potentially we would have with some of our suppliers. But there's software now coming out and thinking around being able to understand supplier emissions within multiple tiers, right? And we begin kind of seeing that feed into carbon pricing. So, maybe Anna has a carbon footprint of X and one of her competitors has a little bit of a higher one that hasn't taken the right action, right? We're thinking about putting a carbon price potentially on who has done the due diligence, the action, the investments, to be able to bake that into quality, delivery, and price into our RFP process and put that carbon price on there and start awarding business on that. So the 44 clients I work with, they're all talking about it, right? They're all partnering, they're all understanding, and which is really why a lot of the clients and a lot of small, medium-sized businesses and suppliers, what Anna is doing is best practice, but there's going to be a lot of people, I think, that are not taking the right action, and the product carbon foot software is going to come out, the internal carbon pricing is going to show a differentiation in this. And that's really not only from a brand value, but from a customer value perspective, we're going to hold a lot of weight in it. I know the pharmaceutical industry is, the semiconductor is. So it's really educating and being able to help the suppliers be able to do that in a way as well.
And to echo that point, we have recently actually placed orders, very large orders for steel based on carbon footprint. So there are, some of our customers who've decided to kind of step up on this topic and really kind of make decisions based on decarbonization. So it's, I think this is where the world is moving.
And Anna's probably going to be prepared to take more business, I would assume, in the future with all these actions. But that was one of the messages we had yesterday to our top 50 suppliers was, bet on us, bet on Schneider, invest together, let's go together to do this, right? Walk arm in arm. And even one thing I'll leave you with is Christophe Ricampois, who is our sustainable procurement leader at Schneider, who led our zero carbon program. I talked to him quite a bit. He's like, Dave, with the digital tools we have today, we are now changing our aspect of thinking about supplier decarbonization, and it is now going to be supply decarbonization, where we have baked in a power of two into our supply base through COVID, through the electronics crisis. We have different ways to move business now. And that emissions footprint with the carbon pricing and the product carbon footprinting we will be able to decarbonize supply, and we'll start moving supply rather than working with existing suppliers to get their footprint down. So the actions that you both are taking are definitely going to pay dividends, not only for Schneider, but for multiple large multinationals out there. So I'll leave it at that. I know we have 5 minutes for questions, not a huge audience, but you seem very engaged, so appreciate that. But if there's any questions, please raise your hand. Merrick is in the back to also, yeah, sure, go ahead.
So I appreciate what you said about working with suppliers that are building that car. Sorry, because thanks. I really appreciated what you say with using suppliers that are adhering to that carbon footprint. We do the same.
Yep.
You know, all our steel is green steel, and our concrete is low carbon concrete, and we really have dove into that world as well. The one thing I'm noticing, though, is that Schneider itself isn't necessarily producing those things that can be low carbon, such as controls equipment that can be installed without putting it in an enclosure, without all that. That adds using the Schneider equivalent of a product that I don't have to put in an enclosure, roughly doubles my carbon footprint.
Yeah, no, that's very good feedback. And I'm not going to be the expert on that piece downstream as well, but I think we take it very seriously to understand that feedback, what else is out there in the market with our competitors, and start baking that into our design, right? We have a heavy influence on our design, so feedback like that definitely takes into consideration about improving, right? Especially if somebody else is doing the market, it's key important.
That's actually a really good point that you brought up. As I was scanning back through our net zero upstream facility report, that was one of the action points around ways to lower the carbon footprint of the facility. And to me, that's where the collaboration is going to be extremely important, because that feedback needs to come back to us. We need to go back to our customers. In some cases, it's spec requirements that they've put in place that they haven't really thought about. In some cases, it's just there's some innovation or technology push that needs to happen. Not that it's not possible, but we just haven't looked at it yet. So that feedback is going to be crucially important in terms of this next phase. Because again, I talked earlier about easy wins. We've got the easy wins already. Now it's all, we've all got to roll our sleeves up and get to work.
Yeah, 90%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Excited.
Wow, good feedback.
All right.
Yeah.
I live Canada, and
in Canada, there's a great national pride around green and sustainable. And then it comes time to a contractual engagement. Public sector, notably, who is a strong advocate of clean and green. I don't want to sound disparaging, I don't, but just when it comes to procurement, then it's the lowest price wins. And so we did some assessment on the blockers from what the political spectrum would say, all the way down to procurement. So in your experience, as we advance the decarbonization objectives, where do you see the greatest blocker that you have to overcome today? And you, sir, made a comment, we've gone through the easy stuff. Now it's time for the hard work. Where do you see the greatest blocker from all three of your perspectives, if I may ask?
Yeah. Let's say we are a process supplier, so we know since the beginning the price makes a difference. Okay, so for us, it's not you are sustainable or you have a good price. You cannot do that kind of choice. There is no choice. So our process has to be efficient. Okay, and in our case, being efficient means also being efficient on a number of topics related to environment and to CO2 emissions. So let's say I agree with you that in some cases it's not a fair competition, because we are working on topics where some of our competitors are not at all, and that's not for free. But we still, we've probably since we've been in Europe always, and our competition is from all over the world. So we know that we have to compensate with technology what we do not have from a cost-based perspective. So we are not in a low-cost country, the opposite. Okay, from a labor point of view, energy point of view, everything is not low cost. So we know that we have to cover the gap with technology, and that's what we are trying to do. Not always successful, but it's our job, and it's what I try to do every day. So that's why I say investments. In our case, that's the way. Then again, it's not always a fair, let's say, competition on this topic, but we try to do our best.
I mean, try to change conversation.
Yes, of course.
Without
Of course. Let's say some customer, they hear it, some much less, but we still work a lot on it.
Yeah, we see customers sort of at different ends of the spectrum, and I think some are coming around to, some are already there, some are coming around. For us, the biggest challenge is geography. Not every country has the same support and infrastructure that, can support moving to, lower carbon solutions. Some countries are burning coal, right, to provide your electricity. So, those are some of the, and it goes down to our suppliers and sub-suppliers, et cetera. So that's some of the biggest challenges. Separately from that, our biggest challenge inside our business is going to be the vessels. At the moment, there is no replacement for liquid fuel for, powering, a vessel, right? I mean, in order to use batteries, we'd have to have a battery ship behind our ship, right? So that's going to be the biggest challenge. Again, that's, for 2050, that's where innovation and technology is really going to have to take us step by step, on the way.
Yeah, mate. Yeah. Okay.
Any more questions yet? No one, sure. Go ahead. Yeah, sure.
The global insurance industry speaks about this as, and it's not that from their peak peril. It's so that from the margin. It's a risk to them in a big way. So we see it at a global level, particularly through European leadership, to move towards energy transition as they call it. And they're starting to see some price, let's say, incentives for organizations that are addressing this your supply chain. At a very high level, I would say corporate. So, like your organization, or even within Schneider, are you seeing an correlation to the insurance industry? Are you seeing any incentives come from your underwriters that might help bring a financial incentive to those supply chain partners that are addressing decarbonization? Are you seeing that yet in your organization?
Let's say, I don't see it so much in insurances. We see it a lot in the banking sector. A lot in the banking sector, yes. For now, the impact is small, but I think it will increase and increase. And that's one of the drivers we use to convince the small suppliers. So usually how I advocate to them to measure their own scope 1 and scope 2 is, look, if you do it, you have access to credit with a better spread on finances. Not so much the incentive that we have today, but in some cases it is. Okay, for instance, if you're buying a house, you're a private person, you're buying a house, and you're buying a house in energetic class with high standards, you access to mortgages with better condition than if you're buying a house with lower energy performance. That's for private, and in, let's say, for companies, it's the same. Not so much the impact today, again, but we are seeing it, yes. And then there are also a lot of, let's say, if the impact in 2025, in Italy in this case, there was a government policy to give some financial, let's say, benefits, in some cases even very interesting, if you are investing in something that is improving your efficiency, energy-related efficiency. And so in those cases, it is real impact on finance that you have. So let's say also with the not the solar panels, but other activities. Let's say if the return on investment in 4 years with the contribution, it goes down to maybe 2. Okay, so it speeds up, the return on investment considering the support that you get on specific topics. So not so easy, but still, yes, we see something for sure.
And I would echo that. We've seen it in the same place. It's in finance. It's in availability of credit.
Yeah.
That we've seen the movement. Not so much on insurance. And one anecdote I would pass along: if you want to see this exercised extremely well, look at China. Right? When the government says, here are the areas where we want to invest, money becomes available at attractive rates to those businesses very quickly, right? And, unfavored industries. So they see that that's the lever to use. And we're seeing it a little bit more, much smaller effect in the Western world. I think if that effect grows, then you'll really see, businesses start to move, right? That is the thing that's underpinning all of our operations, is how do you finance it? How do you ultimately, find the CapEx to deploy?
There's also suppliers within Schneider that favorable payment terms, right? They'll take a look at doing that, partnering with a bank. One of my clients right now that we work with has actually gone out to market and say, I'm creating a green fund, X million dollars. And what I would like to do is focus in this region with efficiency projects for this subset of suppliers. And if we can create those projects and we can vet those projects, I will allocate that multi-million-dollar fund to those suppliers to go make the investments at 0% interest, right? So it's not only just public or insurance or banks. We almost have large multinationals now setting aside money to go help unlock supplier decarbonization and to help increase the payback on some of those things. Yeah, it's pretty neat. It hasn't really taken off quite yet, but a lot of work to be done behind it.
Thank you.